Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside Central Health Training Center for another episode of Broncos Now. As always, I'm your host, Sydney Jones. And coming up on today's episode, the Broncos were back at practice today as they continue to prepare for their first road trip to Miami. We'll hear from all three coordinators. Plus, ESPN's Miami Dolphins reporter joins the show to take a look at this matchup from the Dolphins' perspective. All that and more coming up. Broncos were back at practice today here at Centura Health Training Center as they continued to prepare for Sunday's matchup versus the 2-0 Miami Dolphins. We heard from offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi today as he discussed what he saw from this offense versus the Commanders in Week 2.
I think, obviously we started fast and then, turnover, we had really good field position after the punt return, and so that turnover hurt, and then just kind of flopped around for a few drives before we started moving the ball again in the second half. So just we just have to be more consistent throughout the game.
Coach Lombardi also talked about the Broncos' run game and discussed how the first two games are just a small sample size of what this offense can do.
Yeah, I think we were running the ball efficiently early, and then when you go 3 and out a few times in a row, there's no rhythm, and so it's hard to. You're planning on getting into some runs, and you're not converting on third down, and you're punting, and you just don't get the chance to get in the rhythm. And then just the way that game script went, we ended up being down and having to throw. So I think it was just, I don't think it was anything planned. It was just situationally. When you're not getting first downs, you just don't have a lot of plays to establish it, and then you're down a couple scores and you got to get going. So. I don't think it's something that, certainly not something that we're trying to do or plan to do, just the way the game script went.
Plus, defensive coordinator Vance Joseph talked about what he saw on film from the Broncos defense and how he addressed some of those issues this week.
Overall, it's not all bad football. Obviously, we're in our second week. It's going to be some ups and downs, from a, schematic perspective. But I thought it was some good stuff in both games. Obviously, not winning the games kind of puts a light on all of it. But penalties, are huge right now. That's hurting us on defense, keeping drives alive. And we're playing a lot of snaps because of penalties, So we got to coach our way out of penalties. I'll do a better job of coaching the penalties and getting those things right. Even the first game against the Raiders, every drive that they scored, it was a penalty involved. Last week, from the second quarter on, every score they had was a third down conversion on a penalty, or a screen, so those things are correctable, so I'm not worried about that. There's enough good football on tape that I can see it, it's week 2. It's a long way to go, so I'm not discouraged at all.
Vance Joseph also detailed his expectations for this defense and knows they can be an elite unit this year.
I think we can be a very good defense, and, you don't judge that until after the season, obviously, but we have good enough players to be a good defense, absolutely, and I expect that, guys, coming here, my vision was to be a dominant defense, and that hadn't changed, and I'm telling you, on tape in the first 2 games, you can see it happening. The penalties, the misfits here and there, I'll coach better, but we should be a very good defense, and that's the expectation. It shouldn't be any less than that.
Looking ahead to Sunday's matchup versus the Dolphins, both Joe Lombardi and Vance Joseph talked about the challenges their respective units will be faced with.
He's been one of the more successful defensive coordinators over the, since I've been coaching in the NFL. Very sound, very well coached. They do a really good job of keeping a roof over the offense. It's hard to get deep on this group. And, they just do a great job of tweaking their defense for each offense they face. And so figuring out, which receiver they want to take away and, how they're playing their secondary. There's just a lot of nuances to this defense. If you just watch it, you might not, pick up on it. But the more you watch it and study it, you realize that there is just a lot of detail to what they do. And they're very smart in adjusting their scheme, which on the surface doesn't look like a lot, but they adjust the nuances of it for each particular offense that they're facing. So
it's a good offense, and obviously it's based on on what Kyle has done over the years in the running game, and he was a big part of that coaching staff as far as the running game. So he's doing a great job with that offense. They have a lot of speed. I mean, you said it. I mean, it's a track team. I mean, at receiver, you've got 2 guys who are sub 4.3. You got running back guys who are sub 4.3. So it's a lot of speed out there, and he's using them right, man. I mean, it's a Chinese fire drill on tape.
Plus, special teams coordinator Ben Kotwika talked about how important complementary football will be in Miami.
Coaches emphasize that, and we've got to do our part, whether it's in the return game or taking a ball away. The target of opportunities that we have, we just have to make the most of them. And again, like last week where we had the long punt against us, we were able to return it. So, yes, when you play somebody that's explosive like that, those margins, you got to be at your best on those.
Now it's time to take a look at today's injury report. Outside linebacker Frank Clark, defensive tackle Mike Purcell, and safety Justin Simmons all did not participate in practice today. Plus, tackle Garrett Bowles was a full participant. Now joining me on today's episode of Broncos Now to take a look at Sunday's matchup from the Dolphins' perspective is ESPN NFL Nation Miami Dolphins reporter Marcel Louis-Jacques. Marcel, thanks for joining me today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. How are things going down there in Miami?
A little rainy today, honestly, which is nice. We went through a spell where it was just sun, dry. So, it's nice to get that humidity back, make us feel alive. We got to pay a tax to be in South Florida. Some of it's financial, some of it is with the weather.
Well, I do know. I think it's supposed to rain on Sunday as well. So, gearing you guys up for that as well.
Yeah, and that's a good thing, I guess, for visiting fans. I don't know how much they've kept up with Hard Rock Stadium drama over the past year or so, but the visiting side of the stadium, very hot in the middle of the day for these 1 p.m. kickoffs. The sun is going right at you. So for y'all's sake, I hope it rains just to cool off a little bit, because it can be pretty brutal over there.
Oh, Lord. All right. Well, we'll have that to look forward to. Marcel, you, of course, know the Dolphins have gotten off to a really hot start this season, have, of course, won their first 2 games, and then this will be their first home game of the season. So what's just been kind of the mood, the vibe in the locker room over there this week?
Yeah, I mean, to them, they're doing exactly what they expected to do. They're trying not to get too high on it. Mike McDaniel actually had a great comment on it the other day when asked, how much he thinks his team is paying attention to increased AFC East title odds or MVP odds in Tua Tagovailoa's case. And he said maybe last year, his first with the team, he probably would have felt the need to remind those guys, hey, don't buy into the hype, slow it down, one game at a time. This year, he's confident and comfortable that everybody in the building knows exactly what's at stake right now. They know what time it is. They know that there's still a lot of games left in the season, a lot of football left to be played. So, obviously, it's a better mood than 0-2 would have been if they had lost to LA and New England. But, for by all accounts, they are keeping things pretty level-headed here entering week 3.
Well, I know the Dolphins, have one of the most explosive offenses in the league throughout the first 2 weeks. And like you mentioned, Tua Tagovailoa, leads the league with 715 passing yards. So what do you think's just made them so dynamic as a unit throughout the first 2 weeks?
Oh, it helps when you've got the most dynamic playmaking threat in the NFL in Tyreek Hill, who even after all this time, I still don't know if there's a more dangerous wide receiver in the NFL in terms of just explosive potential. But another year in the same system helps. This is the first time that Tua has been in the same system in consecutive years since high school. So having that kind of continuity is big. Not to mention, there was a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, I think, after last year. He felt like he played at a high caliber, and he felt, there's a lot of skepticism about him entering the 2023 season. A lot of it had to do with his durability and his health, but it feels like, he had a little bit something to prove. You can hear it a little bit in his voice sometimes, when somebody last week asked him if he still thought that people doubted his deep passing ability. He says, I don't care. 466 is 466. That's not something that we would have heard from Tua, 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So you can kind of start to see the change there. But overall, it's a coaching staff, it's a locker room, it's a team that has really instilled a lot of confidence in him. They've thrown their support behind him. They let him know that, one mistake, 2 mistakes, 3 mistakes, it's not going to bury you. It's not going to change how we feel about you. You are our guy. And you can only say that for so long, before somebody believes you or they don't. And Tua is at that state right now where he believes them. He's buying in. They're bought into him. It's just a whole system of people buying into each other up here. But it's an offense perfectly tailored to his skill set, and you're starting to see that on Sundays.
I know you mentioned Tyreek Hill. I think the matchup to watch is certainly going to be Tyreek Hill versus Broncos cornerback Pat Surtain. What are just your expectations there, Marcel?
It's going to be a fun matchup. I think there's obviously a little bit of a size difference there. So it's not like you're going to see a very physical, shoving back and forth, jump ball type matchup. That's not a game that I think the Dolphins really want to play here. It's going to test Surtain. If he's going to follow Tyreek around, he's going to be tired at the end of the game. So thank God you guys are up there in Denver, 3,000 miles over, miles, 3,000 feet up. But or is it 5,000? I never was very good at math. But either way, the additional, the cardio is going to do him well because they move Tyreek all over the field. If you've seen them the past 2 games, he's motioning left, right. He's wheeling out of the backfield. Even he said he was tired at the end of the Patriots game. So it's going to be a lot of movement for Surtain if he is going to follow Tyreek Hill. But he might be the only, big play making threat on the field for Miami right now, at least at receiver. We didn't see Jalen Waddle at practice today. He's still coming back from concussion protocol. We'll get the injury report here actually pretty shortly and be able to know whether or not he is going to, he is able to play. But I think it's gonna be a fun matchup. It's gonna be a fun matchup. He's really complimentary of the corner he faced last week, Christian Gonzalez, the rookie from New England. He held him a little bit in terms of just total yard production. I think only 40 catches, but he did have that touchdown, and ultimately, that's what matters.
Right. You mentioned Jalen Waddle. If he isn't able to go on Sunday, who's kind of the next guy up there that the Broncos defense should be on the lookout for?
So I think this would be like a fantastic trivia question about who is the Dolphins' 3rd leading receiver right now. It's River Craycraft, actually. It's River Craycraft, the former 49er, Washington State product, a guy who, a lot of people had either on the bubble or off the team considering the wide receiver additions they've made over the past year or so. But he just keeps on doing the little things. He's a good blocker. He finds the soft spots in the zone. He's a reliable set of hands as well. Like he just keeps doing things that get him on the field. So I would imagine a bigger role for him, also a bigger role for Braxton Berrios. They still have Cedric Wilson, who's been a healthy scratch in each of the past 2 games. And they have Robbie Chosen or Robbie Anderson or Chosen Anderson, whatever you want to call him. He's clearly called himself by a few names, but he's been on the practice squad. He offers kind of like a poor man's version of Jalen Waddle's skill set in that speed after the catch and the ability to take the top off of a defense. So they have a number of ways to go, none of whom obviously are Jalen Waddle, but would expect to see, not a massive change in philosophy, not a huge shift in philosophy. It's, again, something that them and every, I think, NFL team believes in is that next man up mentality, right? And that's exactly what we're going to see on Sunday.
For sure. Marcel, there's a couple fun connections here between the Dolphins and the Broncos. I know Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel, he's obviously a Colorado native, used to be an intern here where he kind of got his start. And then, of course, Vic Fangio used to be the head coach here, and Bradley Chubb will be facing his former team. I know that Bradley said this week that it's going to mean a lot to him to face the Broncos again.
Oh yeah, and I appreciate Bradley's level of kind of like honesty and transparency there. He's not like trying to put on a front and say like, oh, I don't care, it's one game at a time, it's this and that. Vic Fangio said that, but I do kind of believe Vic when he says it. He's not really a guy to mince words there, but it was cool to hear him say like, yeah, like these are guys I call my brothers. It's the team that drafted me, where I really started my adult life. It's a big deal. I think it would probably be a little more surreal if this game was in Denver. I think it probably helps that it's in his new, is his new town. But he's coming off his best game in a Dolphins jersey against the Patriots. 7 pressures, a sack, a forced fumble. Like that's the kind of production that I think Miami expected when they gave him a $110 million contract at the trade deadline last year. But they expect, Jalen Phillips, he's been practicing this week. If it was up to Jalen, he would have went on Sunday night against the Patriots. So would expect to see him again on the field. And, their powers combined, I think the potential that they have as a pass rushing duo, it's so high because both of them they're still so young. They both get after the quarterback. The sack numbers might not really be there per se, but the pressure numbers, the pass rush win rate numbers, it's really hard to say like fast. It's like a tongue twister.
That is a tongue twister.
Those numbers are all there. Basically everything except for sacks, they're right there. And if you ask these guys, they'll all tell you the same thing, that the sacks will eventually come.
Right. Well, of course, we know Vic Fangio's defense well here in Denver, but Marcel, what do you think the challenge is really going to be for Russell Wilson this week going up against them?
Well, the problem is this secondary has played lights out even without Jalen Ramsey. Eli Apple, I think, struggled a little bit against the Patriots, and they didn't really they don't have a good group of receivers out there in New England to really test them, but the Chargers do. And
Yeah.
Justin Herbert he barely registered anything. I think 220, 230 passing yards there, facing Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Quentin Johnson, the whole group of guys. So I think it's a team that they don't allow a lot over the top. And I think that's where, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's where the Broncos really thrived last season, was in those big explosive plays. That's where basically all the offense came from. So
Yep.
they're going to have to, Russ specifically, he's going to have to be able to take what that defense gives him. This offensive line is going to have to carve out rush lanes, running lanes for Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine. This is still a susceptible run defense. They improved a bit Sunday night against New England, but that 230, yards on the ground against LA, that's still pretty fresh in people's minds here. If Denver can control they can control the clock, they can control the game, on the ground, then I think they have a shot at keeping this from becoming a shootout. I'm not necessarily sure any team in the NFL wants a shootout with the Dolphins, but if they're able to control the clock and, like I said, control things on the ground, get Javonte Williams going, Russell Wilson takes care of the ball, then, it's going to be a better game than I think it looks on paper, where, if I'm not mistaken, as of this afternoon, Dolphins are still 6.5-point favorites. It's a lot in the NFL.
Yep. Well, Marcel, so appreciate your time. Thanks for getting us up to speed on the Dolphins, and thanks for hopping on the show.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, Cindy.
Yep. I'll see you on Sunday as well.
Absolutely.
And Broncos fans, don't forget, Paramount Plus is your streaming home for every local NFL CBS game this season. Visit ParamountPlus.com to start your free trial and stream Russell Wilson and the team as they battle the league's best. Plus, get an all-access pass to 24/7 NFL content with CBS Sports HQ, Fantasy Football Today, NFL Slime Time, and more. And this year, Paramount Plus is your streaming destination for Super Bowl 58. Another action-packed Broncos season with NFL and CBS awaits, so stream Paramount Plus from any device all season long. Well, that'll do it for today's episode of Broncos Now. Broncos Country, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure to meet me right back here on the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube tomorrow for a game preview. I'll see you all then.